Hi everyone, I'm Hayley. I'm always in the craft room and welcome back to another episode of my series on making a party dress. The overall design is the bodice from Vogue 1287, but instead of overlapping the fronts, I'm going to sew a centre front seam to make a V-neck, and I'm attaching to that the waistband from 1287 and then the skirt from the pattern Scout Flora. So to catch you up, in episode 1, we designed the dress and sewed a muslin. In episode 2, we sewed the skirt because that was the easiest part and I could test some seam finishes. So let's pick up where we left off and get to work on this bodice. If you watched the previous episode in this series, you know I was having some issues with the fit. There was too much fabric along the front neckline. It was standing proud. So I just wanted to show you the changes I've made to the pattern piece that are hopefully going to fix that. I will say this is all trial and error. I've tried looking things up in my Vogue sewing book, but believe me, I'm no expert. So if you know of a better way to deal with this issue, do share it in the comments below. I'd be super grateful for next time. So what I've done, I had originally taken some length out of the whole bodice just to account for my short torso. So over here, I've taken out a total of 3 centimetres, which is 1.5 centimetres on the fold. But over here, which is the front neckline, I've removed a total of 5 centimetres. So you can see that's getting wider, which should take some more out of this back neckline. If it's still not quite right, I did do a on the go adjustment to the center back neckline, which I could do again. I know how to do that and I can do it when everything's constructed. So I'm going to cut this out, sew the pleats, baste it all together and have a look how we are in the front. Oh, and now for all the marking. Because I have made this pattern a few times, I have actually made the dress twice and also made a toile. What I've done is all of these dots, I've actually poked a hole in so that I can rub my chalk marker over it. And then when I lift it, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, it leaves a dot behind. So I'm going to go and mark all the dots and then do all the joining up, and then we need to flip it and do it on the other side. The first step was to reinforce a couple of corners and clip into them, and then I've pinned all of the pleats on this side of the bodice, and I'm gonna get basting those down. I have got all the pleats done in both bodice fronts. So this is the top and there's the bottom, and I'm really pleased with them. I think it's already looking lovely, and I do just absolutely love this fabric. I think in these lighting conditions today, because it is one of those bright, cool days today, you can really see the fabulous sheen on this. I'm very excited, and you know what? That's all I've got time for today, but I really feel like I've broken the back of this project. The most daunting part was cutting out and marking all the pleats and sewing the pleats, and from now on it's really just basic construction. So the next step is to sew the centre back seam, and then I'll have the bodice to a point where I can try it on and sort out the facing and everything. So yeah, it's really coming on and I am very pleased. I'll catch up with you again soon. Bye for now. So yesterday I only had literally 10 minutes to come in here and get something done. So what I did was sew the back neckline And I've decided just to pink those edges and press them open because this does get fully enclosed when you make it into a collar. The other thing I did was pin the edge of the front facing. So this turns inside and forms part of the neckline. Now, the instructions tell you to stitch it down, and I was thinking about this as I was falling asleep last night. I am changing the neckline on this dress. Vogue 1287, the original pattern is a cross front bodice, and what I did with the toile, and I loved it, was match up the centre front lines, and instead of overlapping one over the other to make the cross, I matched them right sides together and sewed up a centre front seam to give a V-neck. Now, because of that, I'm not really sure how the facing is going to behave, because obviously on the toile, I wasn't doing seam finishing and stuff. I was literally just sewing it all together to check fit and things. So facings are going to turn inside, but then I'm also going to have them meet and a seam allowance inside, which I presume I'll then press open, and I don't want things to poke up above the V-neck. So maybe I'm going to want to tuck seam allowances inside this turned in facing, if that makes sense. I really don't know how it's all going to go, but what I don't want to do is like sew myself into a corner. So what I am going to do with the edge of this facing is just hand baste it, because that way it is finished. If at any time it flips out, there are no raw edges or anything. But it just means that when I get further into the process, if I decide I do need to tuck something into it before I turn it all in, I can undo hand basting stitches really easily and quickly. So I'm going to quickly sit here and hand baste this facing. Do you remember the other day when I was like, oh, I'm nearly done with this project? Yeah, ha ha ha. I'm glad I'm one of life's optimists, but really, what was I thinking? Because I came to the next step, which is to attach the front and the back bodices, and I haven't even cut a back bodice. So here we are back at the cutting table. I just thought to check whether the side seams match, and they don't, because if you recall, I have now taken more length out. So should be 3 centimeters at the side seam. That is 3 centimeters, so why don't they match? Have I taken some more out at the top? No, I don't think so. I think that was just where I had to join 2 pieces of paper because the tracing paper wasn't wide enough. Just think it through. Side seam is shoulder to shoulder. That's the shoulder point. That's the waist. Right, let's match the circle. What? Okay, so the problem is above, because from the circle and the notches, that's all perfect. Did I take some height out of here? and I didn't note it. I must have done. Anyway, that's all fine. So we've got 1.5 centimetres. We need to remove, where have I cut down to? Down to there. You know what? I'm just going to have to fudge it. I'm going to move this up 1.5 centimetres. And that will make the waist seam come up. So, yeah, 1.5. It's basically following that cutting line that's already there. Ish, not really. Oh God, this is so shifty. Just keep it on grain line. 1.5 is like there. That's now 1. 1.5. Okay, and now let's see if they match. So the new shoulder is there. It's there, and they match. I think it'll be fine. And this isn't like me at all, but if needs be, we do actually have enough fabric to recut. That never happens. I'm just writing future Hayley a note about this because I don't know whether what I've done will work, so I don't want to alter the pattern piece right now. And also I don't know if I'm ever going to make this pattern again. Back, bodice, 2 long at side seam, alter next time. And I'm going to stick that on so that if I do ever make this pattern again, when I get that out, I will realise. Oh, Vogue instructions, you do annoy me sometimes. So I'm attaching the back bodice along the shoulder seams and around the collar. And the first thing they have you do is stay stitch the back bodice neckline, which that made sense to me. You're like, oh yeah, I don't want it to stretch out. Then when you do the shoulder seam and the collar and then the other shoulder seam, they tell you to do it in that big 4-way where you sew to a dot, pivot, sew the other one to the dot, pivot, and it's a really tricky seam to get it all to lay flat. So instead, I basted and just went to the dot, stopped, did the shoulder seam up to the other dot, stopped, and now I can do the collar in a separate step, which is much easier than trying to pivot and keep everything flat. But it instructs you to clip into the back neckline so that you can stretch it open so that you can make it match the collar. So I'm just like, what was the point of that stay stitching? Do we want this piece to stretch or do we not? Ugh. So now, if I just clip up to the stay stitching, it won't help. So I need to clip through it. So it was just a pointless waste of everyone's time. Anyway, that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, with a lot of basting and slow sewing, I have got the collar in. It's not perfect, but you know what? We're not going for perfection. Good enough is good enough. And given the nature of this slinky fabric, I really think I did as good a job as can be reasonably expected with my skill levels. I did a slightly better job in the muslin fabric just because it was a nice kind of crisp cotton. But I still think that the overall effect of all the pleats will be beautiful. I need to finish the shoulder seams next and then tuck the collar. But again, that is a job for another day. I'll catch up with you again soon. I am just so ready to be trying this bodice on and seeing how it's looking, because I'm really pleased with how things are going so far. I've now got the collar all stitched in the ditch and turned in. Pleased with that, but I just went to have a look at the side seams and they were fraying so badly, especially along the back. So I've overlocked them to arrest any more fraying, but I might have left it too late. I should have done it straight away, because I think I've lost a good few millimeters on each side to the fraying. And if you recall, the muslin had a problem with the side seams coming forward, so I was hoping to fudge it. Ta-da! I'm really pleased with how this is looking. I think the collar is shaped really nicely. I like the sleeves. So on the front here, I've got markings for centre front where they're meant to overlap. I'm just going to sew the centre front seam. But yeah, I think that's looking good. I do think the side seams are still pulling forward. Oh well. I'm going to cut the waistbands, add those on, and see where we're at. But so far, pretty pleased. As I went to measure the front waistband against the front piece, I realised I needed a fixed front width, and to do that I had to sew up the centre front seam. So I have done that now. I'm happy with the point to which it comes. This side is laying super flat and close, so it looks like my alteration worked. This side is obviously getting some interference from the mic clip, but when I take that off, it is all looking good. So what we need to do now is cut the front waistband, making sure that it matches at the side seams, cut the back waistband, sew those on, and then we should have a better idea of how much the weight is going to affect the centre front. Well, does it look any different than the last clip I showed you? I'm not sure, but I really hope so, because I have just spent an hour, 2, 3, time has lost all meaning, sewing this centre front. Oh, I basted it, I unpicked it, I rebasted it, I did it again, I did it a third time, I pulled everything out and started all over again, and there's a good chance we're just exactly back where we started. However, if I look too closely, I'm very unhappy with it. But I did just run and get something in the house, and as I was passing the hallway mirror, I kind of caught a glance of it and was like, oh, it looks really nice. So I think I just need to sleep on it, because I've been fiddling with it instead. Oh, that interruption was brought to you by my husband. I'm really just having one of those days, honestly. Like, everything I try and do is going wrong. I probably just need to stop, but at the same time, I just want to get on and sew this. We're now about 10 days out from the party, and it's starting to stress me out, and I hate sewing to a deadline. I like sewing for fun and enjoyment and pleasure, and yeah, I think I just need to chill out, go and have a cup of tea. Because I have a feeling I'll watch this back and be like, that's a beautiful bodice, Hayley. Stop it. But I also need to cut out this waistband, and the side seams are definitely pulling forward, but at least now I've got a width. And honestly, they're just rectangles anyway, so I'm just going to do it the size of the front, the size of the back, and seam allowances, and then the skirt I just gather into it. We do need to talk for a second about waistbands though, because interfacing. This is quite sheer, which is why I'm wearing a ridiculous vest today to preserve my modesty. Is it that sheer against the body though? I'm just wondering if black interfacing is going to show. Would I be better doing 2 layers of this, as in actual waistband, almost like an interlining, and then the inner waistband to make it clean on the inside? Or should I just do as the pattern instructs and fuse to the waistband? Or should I fuse to the inner waistband to give it some heft and structure but be less visible, but you'd still be able to see it the same, I think? I don't know, I need to do some samples. Anyway, the one thing I will say, even if I'm not super thrilled with how I've lined up all of these pleats, look how close that is sitting. I have definitely eliminated the problem where this was like sticking right out on the muslin. So, yeah. Progress, I think. Well, it's a new day, and please let me apologise for that little meltdown in the last clip that you saw. It turns out I don't hate the dress. My husband is actually not that annoying. It was just that time of the month. So we're back. It's a new day. We have a new perspective on life, and everything, it turns out, is absolutely fine. The bodice is looking really good, but I do want to do a fit check with the correct underwear on, because at present the side seams are just basted, and before I lock stitch that, I want to be sure we're all good. I did, though, the other day have time to assemble the waistband and the waistband facing. So I actually have cut this out of a cotton, I think it's a cotton poplin. It's a beautiful fabric and I really love it. I made a dressing gown for my dad out of it years ago, and this is the very last remnant. I tried to buy it again. It was from Tia Knight originally, and I have not been able to get it again, but I love it. So I have been looking at the instructions, which I have hanging on the wall over there, and they're stressing me out a bit because I feel like sometimes the big four put too much emphasis on being like correct over being easy to understand. So I would just call this a waistband, the whole thing, a front waistband and a back waistband. But they call the front waistband the front band. They call the back one a back casing because it is going to have elastic in it eventually in the original instructions. I'm leaving the elastic out, but that's by the by. So they call it front band and back casing. And then they call the inner one the front band facing and the back casing facing. So all of the instructions are like, so the front band to the back casing. So the front band casing to the back casing facing, and I'm just like, oh, too many casing facings. Can we not just call it outer waistband, inner waistband? Because in every step of the instructions, like, you know, when they tell you to put the skirt on top of this and then this on top of this to sandwich the skirt in the middle and then flip it up, it's like, so the front band and back casing to the skirt and to the front band facing and the back casing facing. Why isn't it just sandwich skirt between inner and outer waistband? So anyway, turns out I am still kind of a bit stroppy, aren't I? That's my rant today about the big four instructions. I'm going to try on this bodice and make sure it's correct before we proper sew the side seams. And then to get a head start and get ahead of myself in the mental game, I'm going to hem the sleeves, because otherwise if I leave that till the end, I always put it off. So that's the plan for today. Well, hello, it's another new day and it's time for a sit rep. So, I have now hemmed both sleeves. Honestly, this fabric is tricky. I'm using a faff machine which has inbuilt IDT, so it's not that. I'm using the right needle, but I just can't get top stitching with absolutely zero twisting. Is that the word? Like rippling? Anyway, can you see how they're like poking up a little bit? I don't know. I'm not loving it, but you know what? I've given it a good press. It's as good as it's going to get. Once I had those done, I thought about how I'm going to deal with the inside of this bodice front. And what I realised is it was only basted. I'd never actually sewn it. So then I looked at it and then I tried to adjust a few pleats and then I ended up taking out all the basting. Anyway, I've now spent about 2 hours, I'm not even joking, pinning and repinning and basting and rebasting. And anyway, I am now really pleased with it. I think the center front is looking excellent. I've got everything lined up as well as I can. The neckline is looking good. Should have worn my hair in a clip. Sorry. Everything's sitting nice and flat. So I have now sewn that properly and I just need to think about what I'm going to do with the insides. My first thought was that I was going to chop them off on the overlocker and press each side open. But I think I might just turn back the whole thing and press them open, because although this fabric is a chiffon, it's not as see-through as I think it is. Really, is it? Especially against the skin. And I think that will just leave everything flatter and smoother. If I had a line of overlocking just in here, it might be more bulky actually than just turning back all of it, because it's supposed to be across. So when I turn the back, it's only really going like under the bust. Whereas if I finish the whole seam right up to the top of the V, then I think it could get bulky. So that's where we're at. The waistbands are all ready. So I think it's time to base the waistbands on. I've been thinking about the order of construction for this bit. You can see, oh, excuse me, I've got the instructions there. I'm kind of ignoring them at this point because I'm doing a gathered skirt. So I think it might be easier to gather the skirt onto the waistband first, just so that I can really concentrate with getting all the gathers even and stuff, rather than attaching the waistband to the bodice and then putting the skirt on. Because the waistband to the bodice, there's zero gathering, it fits perfectly. I've measured it, we're all good. So I think I'm gonna put the front waistband, the outer waistband, all the way around the skirt, distributing the gathers evenly. And then when it comes to putting the waistband onto the bodice, it's just a 1-for-1 match. And I will at the same time put the inner waistband, which I did out of the navy blue cotton poplin. I'll put that on the bodice at the same time and then flip that down and hand stitch around the skirt. I think I might be able to stitch in the ditch. We'll see when we get there. But as I say, it's just, they're not the flattest top stitching stitches, so we might be better hand stitching. Anyway, overall, good progress. Really happy with the bodice. Let's get on. Today could be the day that we see the whole ensemble, but let's not get ahead of ourselves because, you know, I only went to stitch a bodice, which in my mind was already completely basted, and that took 2 hours. So. Well, that is where we're going to leave it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, including the meltdowns. I want to thank everyone for all their fantastic comments on the last 2 episodes. It is unfortunately too late for me now because the dress is already finished as this video goes out, but it's taken me a long time to edit all these vlogs together. So please do keep sharing your hints and tips, both for working with chiffon and for fitting, because even if I can't use it in this dress, I'm always so keen to learn from all of you and all of your wonderful sewing wisdom to make everything better for next time. And I also know a lot of people are reading the comments and looking there for hints and tips. The final episode is coming where we put it all together and do the big reveal. I hope to see you then. Bye.